Hello, everyone. Welcome to Millennials Are Old podcast, where we remember it because you're old as shit, you're getting old, probably got work in the morning, and you don't have time to remember the old classics. And speaking of very old classics, this week we are reviewing the objectively not millennial film. Uh,
Boomer.
yes, the
With all
19.
respect, this is a boomer classic.
Yes, this is a boomer film. This is almost a silent generation film. The 1967 classic film, The Born Losers. Now, Brian, this was your choice this week. I have no memories of this film at all. So, why did you want us to record this or review this film?
This film stars was written and directed. I have to double check if he directed. I believe he did.
It,
Directed
it was
also,
Tom Laughlin. He directed it.
yeah,
Yeah.
by Tom Hoffman, yeah, who I find a fascinating character in independent cinema. Um, Billy Jack, the protagonist, is his like brainchild. He was very committed, for better and worse, to using films and acting for social justice, for social activism, unabashedly, almost like the way that Rage Against the Machine were obsessed with using metal. And I'm not being sarcastic with that. He single-mindedly, that's why he wanted to make movies. He originally wrote this film in 1950. It, Billy Jack, the character, this is the Born Losers, which is basically a proof of concept for Billy Jack, is a Native American, quote unquote, drifter who travels around the countryside fighting corrupt cops and racists and rapists, um, and protecting the downtrodden. It's a very 60s idea, but predates that. And this movie is a mess. I love it, but it's a mess of a movie, as all of his movies are. It's also a huge, huge deal for independent cinema. And Taylor, I'm sure you have the numbers for that later on. But this is not a movie that when people talk about cult films from the 70s or late 60s, it'll get brought up, but not in the way that I think it should. A lot of people know what Billy Jack's image, the tall guy, the kind of brooding anti-hero type in dark with a like kind of a what do you call that hat? It's not quite a cowboy hat. It's got the big rim. A
Like
lot
a
of
like a
people
10 gallon hat or something like that.
something like that. Then people will say you might have some vague concept, as I did until 2 years ago or so, of him as a socially aware martial artist, which is really the cliff notes of it. But this was a huge hit, and actually, all of the Billy Jack films were pretty successful commercially. This is the only one that I think was really critically successful. Um, and I think it's because this character, even though the films are a mess and it's a weird character, and Tom Laughlin is not Native American, and I'm sure if he made these films now, he might not be starring in them. This struck a big chord with people in the late 60s and early 70s. This is kind of a type of anti-hero that had not really existed in this way in cinema before, which I'll get more to later. Um, and I just think looking back, especially in the context of this show, a lot of films that are of our generation or of the Zoomer generation, whatever, are very hyper socially aware for better and worse. So thinking of something like Glass Onion, but there isn't a lot of that going backwards. And I was kind of thinking like, well, this is almost like one of the root points of that type of movie that is really beating you over the head with its politics. And it's not necessarily bad. I love this movie, but it is a really unusual thing for its time. And Tom Laughlin, I don't know, his career was kind of destroyed by the studio system because I think, we always talk about how studio films now are very focus tested, very kind of formulaic, and that's not always bad. It's just the way they are. A studio will never put money behind like a weird low or mid budget thing anymore. And Tom Laughlin made movies like that, and he made them a success on his own terms in America. And basically, the industry kind of destroyed him for it.
Yes, and before we get too deep into the weeds on the production stuff, because I do have some in my notes about the production of this film. But yeah, my experience with this film, I have very little understanding of Billy Jack before you mentioned we should review this movie, Brian. I was aware of the character, and I had seen him in various retrospective stuff from like the 60s and 70s, but I had never even heard of this movie. I'd heard of Billy Jack, but not of this particular movie. Um, and I was really drawn to it, obviously, because of course you suggested it. But reading up on Tom Laughlin himself, as in, for the Wisconsin peeps who listen to this episode, he was born and raised in Milwaukee. He actually went to Washington High School, which is a high school on the north side of Milwaukee now, and he's another archetype of like boomer and like greatest and like silent generation people that exist in Wisconsin, especially like liberals. They love claiming they're Native American when they're not Native American.
That's true. To his credit, Laughlin never did that personally, but when you put it out, it's like, fuck, he's right.
Yeah, it's like, and to be fair, both
the character's name is Billy Jack Warren. It just didn't put on a poster.
No shit. That's great. That's really fucking funny. I mean, I wonder if Elizabeth Warren knows about Billy Jack. She has to.
She might actually be a little bit young to actively have seen it when it was a hit. Now that I'm thinking,
maybe. But yeah, either way. So, and of course, we've mentioned before, Brian and I grew up in Northeast Wisconsin. we've interacted with a lot of Native American people, and none of them look like Billy Jack. None of them look like Billy Jack.
I'm not saying it's like him. I know that, like, not like, I mean, the thing is, I believed at face value when I first started watching this that Laughlin was part Native American, because, I don't know what, because also I want to say to his credit, he doesn't do any real affects. He plays it very straight. I assume it feels like the same way he would play it if he were playing himself as a white man. To his credit,
he doesn't do like a fucking Dances with Wolves affect or something. Like, he's not doing anything honestly like objectively offensive with his portrayal, which in my opinion makes it as least problematic as possible for doing red face.
It's still bad. I don't want to be, but I don't know. I very much like Tom Laughlin. The movie is fascinating because of him. Because of what he's bringing, not because we'll get into this. The movie's, I think I like it. It's a spotty movie.
It is, yes.
But Laughlin himself, fascinating guy, and there is not another character like him in American cinema.
No, for sure. And speaking of, actually, let's get into some of the details here before we get too lost in the weeds here. So once again, this movie came out in 1967. Interestingly enough, it was actually rated PG, which honestly blew my mind. Because there's a lot of rape happens in this movie, although it's off camera, and also there's also a good amount of blood in this movie and like questionable language. So I was kind of shocked it was rated PG.
Although I do think that's like, appropriate given that, now everyone, I think kids are really kind of pampered and hidden from media that is more serious, but I do think the portrayals of like good and bad in this film are very clear and like very appropriate for kids to see.
No, I totally agree with that. When I saw PG, I was genuinely shocked by it.
Rape is a big central theme of this from the villain standpoint. Like, it is.
Yeah.
It's the fundamental fear of this movie. It's the fear of sexual assault.
It is. But once again, this movie was directed by Tom Laughlin under the pseudonym of T.C. Frank, which were the initials of his 3 children, which I think is interesting. So TCF were the initials of his children. This movie was written by Elizabeth James, who played Vicky in this movie. And interestingly enough, Brian, do you want to know how I knew for a fact this was written by a young woman?
How?
Because there's a scene near the end of the movie where a guy asks a bunch of people their date of birth and then their star signs after he gets their date of birth.
Holy shit.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh, a horoscope. This is 100% written by like a 20-year-old woman. That has to be the case.
Laughlin doesn't strike me. I was actually thinking last night, Laughlin doesn't seem like a guy who would give a shit about this.
No, not at all. But I just thought that was funny when I saw that. I'm like, oh, it was written by a 20-year-old woman. That makes so much sense.
I wouldn't say I believe in it, but it's just kind of interesting, and it's weird. It's weird how much it puts together. Not that I believe in it.
Yeah. Oh God. Fucking hilarious.
I also have had my signs read. Don't get mad at me, everyone.
Yeah, and also she was 22 when she wrote the script, so I was pretty close on a 20-year-old woman.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. But yes, Tom Laughlin is most well known for this film as well as other films in the Billy Jack universe, such as the eponymous Billy Jack film, The Trial of Billy Jack, Billy Jack Goes to Washington, and the unfinished film The Return of Billy Jack, which, like I said, hilariously enough, was never released. So that's kind of an ironic title.
We probably won't get into it today. Very sad and interesting story behind that fifth film.
No, for sure. And I also do want this to the audience at home. This is going to be part one of the Billy Jack retrospective that I would like to finish someday.
I don't know how long it'll take because it's not gonna be like a serialized series right now.
No. We'll revisit it at some point. He also starred in a film called The Master Gunfighter, as well as other small productions. But he was, of course, Tom Laughlin. 99% of people know him from Billy Jack franchise, obviously. The movie is about 113 minutes long. And then, of course, we were talking about the importance of this movie's importance in the independent film history. The movie had a budget of $400,000. $100,000 of it was self-financed by Tom Laughlin himself, and the other $300,000 was financed by American International Pictures, which was the company that distributed it. And this movie grossed $36 million, which is insane. That is unheard of. That is like Blair Witch Project or like the original Paranormal Activity level profitable. Like, that's crazy.
And for a movie like this, which is ostensibly an action movie, but is really like kind of a socially conscious like melodrama, to make that kind of money would not happen now. Absolutely would not.
No. And also to the audience at home who may say, because when we get into the plot, this movie is about like evil bikers and a guy trying to stop evil bikers. You may think, is that a little bit similar to Easy Rider? This movie came out years before Easy Rider came out. So this movie might have been an influence on Easy Rider to a certain extent.
Probably.
And Easy Rider was another film that also just blew away box office results. In fact, it was actually more profitable than this movie, but not by a crazy amount.
But the mix of like the cultural impact and financial impact of Easy Rider, probably in the top 10 most important films in American cinema.
No, I totally agree with that. And like I said, it's a movie that I had never heard of until you mentioned it. Like the title itself, I'd never heard of it, but it's amazing how much of a fucking giant hit this was. It's pretty insane.
Yeah.
And last one here, on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 60% critic score and a 63% audience score. Now, once again, that's considering this movie is 55 years old, you're not really going to get a lot of movie reviews from that time. So it only has 5 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. So, the margin of error stuff, it really, 3 out of 5 reviews are positive. It just is what it is. A lot of old movie reviews did not survive.
Oh, yeah, especially a film like this that, again, was like a movie you were seeing in a drive-in.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then for the trivia here, so here's some interesting little trivia facts. This film was banned in Sweden for its violence in 1968, and then rebanned in 1972, and then 1975 as well. Yeah, I mean, Northern Europe with like Britain and the video nasties and Scandinavia, they just fucking loved banning movies in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, was that a particularly socially conservative time and place?
Sweden wasn't really a very socially conservative time at all. In fact, especially in the 70s, they were about as socialist and communist aligned as you could get in like mainland like liberal Europe.
That's what I was thinking.
Including in fact, Sweden was the only country in Europe to actually support the Viet Cong over the American occupation of Vietnam. So I would not describe it as a particularly socially liberal time, but Europe is far more preoccupied with censoring violence than nudity. And this movie does have a fair, especially for a 60s film, has a lot of violence, especially violence against women in it. So I kind of understand why. Whereas of course America is more interested in banning and like censoring sexuality than violence. So that's always been the the dichotomy between the American censorship and the European censorship. So
The difference between which pearls they're clutching.
exactly, yes. Next fact here is Tom Laughlin once again used the pseudonym T.C. Frank for his director's credit. The name stands for his three children, Frank, Teresa, and Christina, which I think is a very sweet, touching tribute there.
Yeah, that's sweet. I like that. Didn't know that. Interesting, because like Laughlin does not seem like a guy who wouldn't want people to know he directed his films.
Part of it might be is that if people, because once again, this movie, 3/4 of it was financed by an independent film company. I think part of it is if they saw that he was like starring and directing it, they may not have been as interested in it.
Oh yeah,
That's just a thought.
Seems like a vanity project, which it was, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Next fact here is when Billy is locked up after the brawl at the start of the movie, his jailer is played by the same actor who locks up John Rambo at the start of First Blood.
They take place in the same universe.
I mean, to be honest, this movie does have some similarities with First Blood too.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't even remember if they say it in this film, but I mean, Billy Jack is also a traumatized Vietnam vet.
They actually do in the opening monologue, which I really wish I'd written out and saved. But the opening monologue is kind of hilarious, to be honest.
It is. Very, very serious. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I love this movie, but this is like it is like the truest type of camp where it's like not supposed to be campy.
Yeah, exactly right. The next fact here is it was based on a real incident in 1964 when members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang were arrested for raping. Excuse me.
For raping?
Yeah, for raping. Were arrested for raping 5 girls in Monterey, California. So I did know that little fact at least, but I doubt a half Indian cowboy shot a bunch of fucking motorcycle gang members, but who knows? Maybe I'm totally wrong about that. Who knows?
It's a real thing, by the way. It's if anyone has read you know Hunter Thompson's book or any of the articles by Lester Bangs of the time he spent with the Angels, they were in the 60s and 70s and probably thereafter, they were basically like a rape cult, like a rape gang.
Oh no, for sure. Like and the fact that the Rolling Stones hired them for Altamont Speedway just 2 years later, and they fucking stabbed that guy or whatever at the the fact that anybody trusted these fuckers with anything is horrifying to me.
It's insane.
But I mean, granted though, all those old rock guys, they were raping women all the time too. Let's be real.
I mean, to be honest, unfortunately, if we're thinking about a reason that they might have looked away at some things, that is a reason that may have happened.
Yeah, no, for sure. Once again, this is a self-financed film. Tom Laughlin ran out of money during post-production. He showed a working print to his contacts at American International Pictures, in parentheses, a company noted for its exploitation fare, and they agreed to give him the $300,000 he needed to complete the film. And this was American International Pictures' highest-grossing movie until the original Amityville Horror in 1979. So for 12 years, this was their highest-grossing film.
And that gives you some further context because, of course, Amityville, one of the biggest horror films upon its debut of all time.
Oh no, for sure, yeah, a gigantic film. Obviously, of course, as many people may or may not know, the Amityville Horror is a complete hoax case from the known from the fraudsters known as the Warrens. But that's not here nor there.
Yeah, Annabelle films.
Yes, and if anybody's ever curious on the Warrens' other fake fucking paranormal adventures, watch the Conjuring movies because that's literally what those movies are about.
That's also it takes place in the Billy Jack universe.
Yes, very much so. Absolutely does. And then the last little fact here I thought was really interesting. So the composer of this film was a guy by the name of Michael Curb, who later went on to be the lieutenant governor of California under Jerry Brown's second administration. So more than likely, So more than likely, the song California Uber Alice was also partially inspired by Mike Curb. But who
Yeah,
knows?
that would make sense that someone who was aspiring to kind of level up in the Democratic Party at the time, was an assistant on this film.
Oh no, he was a Republican.
Was Jerry Brown, because Jerry Brown's been running as a Democrat for decades now. That's
Oh no,
really
no, Jerry Brown's a Democrat, but Mike Curb is a Republican. That
oh,
was,
okay. I see.
I
Sorry.
mean, that was back when there was such a thing as liberal Republicans. I mean, not super common, but they did
Yeah,
exist. Um,
my mistake. I misinterpreted what you were saying. I got
oh no, it's all good. Yeah, I do think it's funny that talk about, because Tom Laughlin was very much involved in social justice issues. That the guy that he got to coordinate the music for this movie later became a fucking lieutenant governor of the state. It's wild to me.
I
That
wonder
could
if
not
he
have.
ever got that later in life.
Yeah, right. Well,
Well,
I
because
mean,
he's done a lot.
yeah, Tom Laughlin did try to run for president a couple times.
Yeah, I think most famously in '92.
I mean, shit. If he won and he made another movie during his presidency, I would have watched it.
I mean, like, yeah. Well, that's what that. So we make it into the future. That's what the fifth Billy Jack film was supposed to be.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah, no, it's Billy Jack running for president.
Oh, that fucking rocks. Hell yeah, dude. All right, so let's get into the synopsis of this classic film. So Billy Jack is introduced as an enigmatic half Native American Vietnam veteran who shuns society, taking refuge in the peaceful solitude of the California Central Coast Mountains. His troubles begin when he descends from his unspoiled setting and drives into a small beach town called Big Rock, which I do believe actually a lot of this movie was shot in Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, and a bunch of other smaller cities around Orange County and Los Angeles County. So I think it's and to be fair, the scenery of this movie is pretty good.
It's very nice. I mean, it's a lot of obviously they're shooting with real light primarily when they're outdoors. This seems to be an area that Laughlin was pretty well acquainted with, knew how to get on camera. Still haven't been to California, even being out in the Pacific Northwest for a few years. But boy, I just put on Born Losers, and I feel like I'm
Yeah. A minor traffic accident in which a motorist hits a motorcyclist results in a savage beating by members of the Born Losers Motorcycle Club, led by Danny, played by the 70s version of Danny Masterson.
when
That's
you
right.
said that. Oh, it does. Yeah, it does look like Danny Masterson, and has his kind of vibe.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, I was kidding. Yeah, exactly, a rapist. And I mentioned to you last night that like half the fucking bikers in this movie look like different versions of Danny Masterson. It's hilarious.
And while we're here with the introduction of the biker gang, probably a good time to do this. So this film is the second Billy Jack film that Laughlin wrote. He wrote the film Billy Jack, which is the sequel to The Born Losers, first. He actually wrote the first version of the screenplay in the 1950s. Continued trying to get it made and updating it. Could not get it made. Could not get anyone interested and willing to give him the money for it. When kind of biker exploitation was taking off, Laughlin wrote The Born Losers as a Billy Jack introduction centered around a vicious biker gang so that he could ride that fad into getting the money to make the film he really wanted to make, which is follows and is of course Billy Jack. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole reason that this is centered around bikers instead of around like I don't know, evil CEOs or racist cops, which is kind of more the milieu of the later Billy Jack films. Senators, bad guys are bikers in this because people wanted to see bikers, and Laughlin was going to get his fucking money.
Exactly. The horrified bystanders are too afraid to help or be involved in any way. That's what I think is really interesting. So every bystander in this movie is a complete pussy. It's hilarious. Oh, yeah. Like everyone's like, I don't want to get involved. Like they don't even call the cops. They're just like, oh, we don't want to get involved, honey.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with me. This ain't none of my business.
Yeah, exactly. It's so fucking hilarious. Billy Jack jumps into the fray and rescues the man by himself. And he does that by cornering some of them and then shooting one in the stomach.
It's awesome.
This is like a real Ronnie from fucking Observe and Report moment there. For
this is a movie that Ronnie probably watched a lot.
Oh, for sure, yeah. At this point, the police arrive and arrest Billy for using a rifle to stop the fight. The police throw Billy in jail, and the judge fines him $1,000 for discharging a rifle in public. The assaulters get a $150 fine or 30 days in jail. And Billy Jack gets a $1,000 fine or 4 months in jail for defending a guy for probably getting murdered. So that, that's just a corrupt fucking law enforcement in this small California town.
And like, what about that guy he saved? Couldn't he testify on Billy's behalf?
No, don't you understand? Nobody wants to testify because they don't want reprisal from a gang of 8 losers with no weapons.
Greasy guys who, I don't know, just like go, hey, chickie, at all the girls on the beach, and everyone's like, watch out for them.
By the way, this gang of greasy, weird guys who literally none of them have any firearms.
No.
Like, so why are they such a fucking threat? Like, I just don't understand.
Well, they're on motorcycles. They can just they can ride around you in circles.
Yeah, I guess, but it's just
they can laugh at you as they drive by. I don't know.
It's bizarre. So the financial strain of the fine leads him to sell his Jeep. He is treated with suspicion and hostility by the police. Meanwhile, the marauding bikers terrorize the town. They rape 4 teenage girls and threaten anyone slated to testify against them, with the kid brother of the leader being fingered as part of the rape. Now, I think it's really interesting is, so we're talking about he gets hostility by the police and the locals. Everybody who ever interacts with him, like, hey, what's up? What's up, Redskin? You Indian piece of shit. And it's like, how could you guess that?
Exactly. Yeah. This guy looks fucking German. This guy looks like a German guy.
He legit just looks like a guy from Wisconsin who was in Florida for 2 weeks and got a tan and came back.
Yeah. But people at a distance, they go, hey, Indian.
Yeah. At one point, they literally, they throw like every slur at the book at him. They're like, hey, when you come back from the reservations, you fucking learn that squaw language. And I'm like, what the fuck says this to a white guy? What the fuck?
References to like Firewater. Like, this is a white guy.
That'd be like if Brad Pitt was in a movie and it's like, hey, what's up, N-word? And it's like, what the fuck? What's going on here?
Like, what?
Yeah, just like...
You'd be like, I am a little offended that you said that, but mostly I'm confused.
Yeah, mostly I'm just confused. Yeah, it was funny as Tom Laughlin just looks like deathly serious every time they slurred him. And I honestly think in the back of his mind, he's like, I'm literally Irish. Why are you calling me this?
I'm an Irishman.
And like I said, especially considering I live like two or 3 miles from like the house he probably spent the majority of his childhood in. I can tell you for a fact he's the whitest motherfucker of all time. There's no way he's anything.
Yeah. So this is a white guy from Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. But that's the thing though, like a guy of Tom Laughlin's age or a little younger, they love claiming they're Native American when they're not Native American. It's fucking hilarious. Oh, Jesus Christ. Vicky Barrington, once again, played by Elizabeth James, sorry, not Elizabeth Warren. Who once again who wrote this movie, is a bikini-clad damsel in distress. Which is just, she shows up in this movie as like a college student waiting for her dad to come home, and then you next see her in what I can only describe as a baby Lolita outfit. It's bizarre. I don't understand this outfit. She's got like a weird like white like fluffy thing that like a baby would wear on the top of her head, and she's wearing just like a pure white bikini that looks like underwear. It's just the weirdest look I've ever seen on anybody. I just don't understand.
The bathing suit. And this character is kind of So
Yeah, it's a bathing
there,
suit, exactly.
there's a lot of stuff in Tom Laughlin's films that I think are really ahead of the curve in how it deals with social issues. And in fact, almost everything. And even the way that like kind of rape culture and the way women are treated and subjugated in his films, including this film, I think are dealt with very well for the time. But the actual way that women are written is not always.
No, it is
I wouldn't
very
say
bad.
that it's, yeah, I wouldn't say it's not like it's not really misogynist. It's not hateful. He just doesn't know how to write women like real people.
No, exactly. Um,
This character, she's kind of spunky. She's, like kind of like the female equivalent to Tom Laughlin, where she's
yeah,
kind of, she's got a real breakfast at Tiffany's kind of vibe going on.
exactly. But yeah, she is twice abducted and abused by the gang. The first time she goes along with the idea of being a biker mama if she can get drugs from her bike to take as a way to sneak up on a biker to knock him out and flee. Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry. This is I took this part from Wikipedia. I think they probably did it wrong, but basically, they're like, "Hey, you want to get in the gang? We're all gonna run a train on you, and you just have to deal with it." And she's like, "Oh yeah. How about I just get some drugs from my car real quick?" And then she fucking hits a guy who's like trying to rifle through her bag to get drugs from the car or from the bike and hits him in the head with it. And honestly, like who wouldn't want to have a non-consensual train ran on them by these just extremely sexy men?
These men who just look like they have not seen a bath.
Well, not only that, but they also are. Is it just me, or was the Nazi symbolism that they had was not very well thought out? Like
No.
they literally just have like a swastika on the wall. They have a Himmler quote, and then one guy has like the worst like stick and poke fucking swastika tattoo on his arm I've ever seen. It looks so bad.
My idea about that, well, there's two, first of all, of course, like the Hells Angels and a lot of other biker groups either loved Nazi iconography or in some cases were, kind of neo-Nazis. But the other thing is that I think Lofton really wanted to tie this in with his political ideas.
Yes.
Because just bikers itself, pretty apolitical, which is not going to sit well with Tom Laughlin and Billy Jack.
No.
So by making them Nazis, you can see that, like, that Billy Jack is also fighting fascist bikers and not just bikers. But it is goofy. Yeah, the Himmler quote on the wall, especially, you're like, what bikers have inspirational quotes on their wall?
Yeah, well, exactly. And also, I don't know if was that a poster of James Dean in the background too? Who was that a poster of? Okay,
That was James.
Was James Dean a Nazi? Like what the
fuck? Actually, what I was thinking about that, what's interesting is Tom Laughlin is a guy that probably loved and was hugely influenced by James Dean, given his performance in this. And
okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting that he put that on the bad guys' wall, because I'm sure there were bikers in that era that liked James Dean. We're talking 60s counterculture. But really, Laughlin, I think, loves James Dean. It's weird that he attributed that as a villain character.
No, for sure. And also, before we get too much into the plot synopsis even more, I will say that Tom Laughlin, from the little I've read about his bio, he seems to me like an archetype that no longer exists in society, is the base lib, as Felix from Chapo has said. He is he is a based lib for sure. Like no fucking question.
Ron Perlman is a surviving base lib, I think.
Oh yes, I forgot about Ron Perlman. There are some base libs still left, but Tom Laughlin was an OG based lib. Like he was a guy that was willing to like bust heads for like fucking George Wallace or something like that. Like
Roger Ebert hated this movie. He said that it was anti-constitution and that Laughlin believes that good fascists are going to beat bad fascists.
Oh, fucking hilarious.
I was thinking that when I was reading about him today. This is a guy who's a big lib who is like really believes in it, really wants to fucking kick some ass over it.
Yeah, and also, by the way, I totally got the name wrong. Was not willing to bust heads for George Wallace. I meant George McGovern. George Wallace was a segregationist governor.
I was gonna say
No, I meant George McGovern. He was willing to bust heads open for George McGovern. That's the kind of base lib that Tom Laughlin was. Like, he probably would like take a bike lock and beat some like 60s chud in the head. Just be like, you don't like George McGovern? Fuck you. Like, he was that type of guy.
Should have been in a Billy Jack movie.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. But yes, her supposed plan of ditching her bike to flee on foot results in her being caught and raped to the point where she's put in the hospital by a mute man who had his tongue cut out as a child.
I couldn't tell if he actually had his tongue cut out or if that was like a joke that the biker said.
It was whatever it was fucking weird.
Such yeah, there's a mute biker that just goes just in a weird sound.
This movie's fucking weird at points, man. It really is. But yes, the second time, the bikers steal a cop car and try to steal her from the hideout after she agrees to testify for the trial. Her attempted escape has her run into Billy, who takes a swing at the bikers and takes Vicky to his location on her bike, which is a mobile home in the middle of nowhere.
Billy's lip these days.
She is spooked enough to not testify. The gang comes back to his place when the two are out for lunch and steal his money. So yeah, he was able to get $600 for his Jeep, which, to be fair, that was a pretty good Jeep. $600 even back then was probably, and they even mentioned in the movie, is a giant ripoff.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, they steal his $600. Little by little, the other victims are spooked by the bikers and the ineffective law enforcement, and that's the thing in this movie. The law enforcement in this movie, I think, are somewhat well-meaning, but they are completely incompetent. Completely fucking incompetent. And also the synopsis that I have here did overlook the Jane Russell cameo, who was, of course, as Brian mentioned last night, was a very hot woman, of course, back in the day, along with a contemporary of like Marilyn Monroe and stuff. And this was like her second to last movie ever before she retired from acting.
She's really having it up. And it's funny because it's very like most of the acting in Born Losers is attempting naturalism, although it does not often succeed. But then Russell comes in and she's just like, hey, kids, what's going on?
Yeah.
I can't believe you got raped.
Yeah, it's just... Ooh, and also the reactions of the women who were raped in this movie, like, they're literally cartoonish. It's
there's a lady, like, she's had some sort of episode, and so she's just raving and screaming and pulling out her hair. It's pretty offensive.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I think for the time it was brave to actually show, I think, like, maybe the aftermath of a rape, but definitely, yeah, in modern eyes, it's pretty bad.
Pretty not good. I mean, that's really the only thing in Laughlin's filmography where I'm like, he really missed it on this one. As far as if it's offensive or not, well, that and the red face, which so those two things.
Okay, so next here in the night, Billy drives out to see the bikers to talk to their leader about his stolen money. Once again, the guy who looks the most like Danny Masterson at this point. He gives them until tomorrow to get it back before leaving. The next day, the bikers confront the two at a gas station. Billy fights a member known as Gangrene and beats him before getting some of the money back and taking one of their bikes. Danny offers Vicky to serve as the sexually compliant biker mama. Once again, is just the girl that these greasy, gross guys just run a train on, and the trade-off is, I'm not sure what the trade-off is. It doesn't sound, it's not very clear.
Well, they get to hang out with the bikers then, so it's like, okay, you get to hang out with all of us and live our exciting life of being greasy on a dirty couch, and we get to fuck your brains out.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I keep talking about trains. There's a lot of trains in this movie, but I thought it was a motorcycle movie. What the fuck's going on here? No.
These two scenes are probably my favorite overall. I really love the Billy Jack character, and I love Tom Laughlin. I love his performance, and these scenes where he gets to be kind of quiet and seething with bad guys, that really shows. So his big influences are like he loves Marlon Brando. And I have to say the other one I'm guessing is James Dean. And you really see, I think, those two actors, as young Marlon Brando, that is, on the Waterfront era, Wild One era, kind of coming through in his performance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I definitely do see some similarities with James Dean and Tom Laughlin. He is, he's like a square-jawed, fucking handsome butch guy, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
it's
he's
just that kind of like a wry response to everything, you know.
it's just like an archetype of people. And to be fair, even though this movie was an independent film, but that's just an archetype in Hollywood you just don't see anymore.
Not really. I
Is
think
a Tom Laughlin type guy?
everything is made to be too like, well, this needs to be relatable to everyone. So they make every character a fucking doughy nerd who's just
Yeah,
snarky all the time. It sucks. It's the most annoying type of guy. It doesn't need to be in every movie.
exactly.
Um,
And is that very famous? Well, to me, article. Read the headline of the article is "Everybody's sexy now, but nobody's horny," which is like
that's great. I've never heard that before, but that's excellent.
like everybody nowadays is just very very attractive, but nobody fucks. But Tom Laughlin is, even though a handsome guy, but you can tell in real life Tom Laughlin probably fucked a lot.
Oh
Like
yeah,
just
that's a
being
guy.
real.
It's a guy who probably knew how to fuck to get into situations where people wanted to fuck him because he's
Yeah,
got good.
exactly. But yeah, even though you could be like a 10 out of 10 hottest dude in the world, you'd be like, oh, you're really like pretty. And they do like that thing where they like tap their fingers together and like bring their feet in, like, ooh, woo, like that type of situation. It's just like, it's just really bizarre. But,
Way.
or they go like, I just don't really feel safe right now. I just, it's like soft boy shit.
So I really shouldn't be alone right now.
Yeah, that's it. I shouldn't be alone right now.
Sorry for DMing you again. I just feel like, I'm getting over a cold. And also, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent. And also, my dog died.
And also for some reason he has a broccoli haircut. I don't know why. But that's not here nor there. I'm gonna stop shitting on millennials this episode. Okay, I'm sorry. Stop shitting on Zoomers. I'm gonna stop shitting on Zoomers.
So
Um,
that a little Freudian slip. You were trying to shit on the
to be
Zoomers, but
fair, that is a type of millennial guy that exists too, although not nearly as common as the Zoomer guy like that.
no,
But
no, they were the prototypes to that guy.
yeah, very much so. Yes.
Like
Uh,
Hobo Johnson.
oh God, Jesus Christ, I could talk about that shit all day, but the gang comes to the hideout to ask them to see Danny by their hideout, which reveals they have kidnapped one of the rape victims in a scene that is just so ridiculous. The dad's like, "Oh, I'll protect you, honey. Don't worry, they'll never find you." And then there's a shootout or something, and they're like, "Oh, we got to look out for whatever." And then while they're gone, they just like go in like a fucking like a sitcom situation while nobody's looking and just grab this girl and take her away. It's bizarre.
Oh, yeah, a lot of the plot of Billy Jack films actually kind of works with sitcom conventions. So that's
Yeah.
and those sort of plot devices, because it's really just about moving the story along so Billy Jack can be tough and then be a platform for Laughlin's morals.
Yes, very much so. Once again, the incompetent dad that I just mentioned, he tries to intervene, but he fails. Billy is hit from behind with a tire iron and beaten after trying to distract long enough for Vicky to escape, but they both fail in their endeavors. It is then that Vicky agrees to be a biker mama to get them to let go of Billy. And what I find interesting is, so as we've mentioned, as I think you mentioned earlier, Brian, but Billy Jack is a half Indian, former Vietnam veteran who knows Hapkido and just beats people up all the time. Tom Laughlin and Billy, there's no action in this movie. Like there is very little action in this movie.
Yeah. And this is actually I'm going to tell you something, Taylor. This is the thing most people. You asked me last night when I said, "Oh, the two best ones in the series are Billy Jack and the Trial of Billy Jack." And actually, Trial of Billy Jack very good writing wise. And you said they're basically action movies, right? And I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And there's more action in the sequence than there is in Born Losers. But Laughlin's interest is not in action choreographing. It's in looking tough and saying tough guy shit. like that. I'm gonna be honest. That is like the action in these movies. That's where you get the kind of testosterone kind of thrill from. Is from seeing Laughlin be tough and vocally spar, and then just knock someone out kind of off screen with one punch. There's not really a lot of cool action choreography, and I love that about these movies. But I'm just being real. Like
no, and even though I really do, and we'll actually I'll get into it right now before I mention it, but at the police station, Billy is unable to get help from the police or the local residents. So even then, once again, these bikers who have no weapons are like even the police are scared to interact with these fucking guys. It's ridiculous.
Just absolutely run amok over this town because they smell like diesel fuel or something, and everyone's like, stay away from those guys.
They smell like weed and stale farts. It's like we gotta stay away from those guys. What the fuck?
One of the born losers' names is Krabs.
Yeah, because he has crabs.
Because he has crabs, yeah. And so maybe it's like, let's stay away from those born losers.
Yeah,
all kinds of fights on them.
Yeah, do you think it's like a bed bug situation? Like, oh, we don't want that guy in our jail cell. He'll spread the bed bugs everywhere, like crabs.
Yeah, don't reach that guy. Do not get the crabs around here, because then they get on the prisoners, and they get on me, and then bring it home to my wife. And my wife's going, hey, hi to you, I have crabs now. I'm going, oh, it's from one of the inmates. And she's going, what?
It's just so bizarre. Oh, Jesus Christ.
But yes, the losers are all powerful in this town.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, so Billy Jack endeavors to go to the gang's lair himself to finally rescue Vicky. Particularly when and also at this point, the born losers have intimidated every single victim of the rape to just recant and not even bother testifying. Billy, armed with a bolt-action rifle, captures the gang. Once again, Danny Masterson shoots the leader in between the fucking eyes, and also, I mean, honestly, the single best shot of the entire movie, the slow motion where he just slumps over dead. It fucking rocks. I love it.
So a real thing that I read about the violence in these movies, but I mostly don't agree, don't believe, except for in that scene and a few other instances, is that Laughlin did say that he studied Kurosawa.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much I believe that. But in that scene, when I look at that compared to other death scenes in the late 60s in America, I go, oh, I could see like Kurosawa influence on that because there's a lot of gravity to it. What Laughlin claims is that he tried to make the violence unglamorous. That's not really true, especially in the later movies.
No, I mean, the when he shoots that guy in between the eyes and he drops in like a 30-second fucking death slow-mo, that's a pretty glamorized murder you just committed, bro. Like,
very much so. Which I don't care. I like the Billy Jack character. In fact, one of the most frustrating things to me about this series are how often the character says, I have to remain a pacifist, when he clearly would be in the right if he just killed some people,
Yeah, exactly. But at this point, Billy Jack forces some of the gang members to take Vicky to the hospital, who's been badly beaten. And of course, they beat her, and then I think they rape her again, right? Or am I wrong about that?
I think that's that's my read on that scene. Yeah.
So this girl's been raped like 3 fucking times in this movie. It's a lot. This girl's fucking traumatized horribly. As the police finally arrive, Billy abruptly rides away on one of the gang's motorcycles. And talk about police incompetence. A police deputy accidentally shoots Billy in the back, mistaking her for a fleeing gang member. And to be fair, that is a total cop thing to do. Like the second that it's like, oh fuck, that's one of the guys that I've failed to capture 13 times. Let me just shoot him real quick while his back is turned.
Yeah, the cops in this movie are like the same genre of cop as the detectives in Last House on the Left.
Yep. And that's like, never mind. I'll say it in 30 seconds because I'm almost done with the synopsis here. He is later found nearly dead, lying by the shore of a lake. He's placed in a stretcher and is flown to the hospital in a helicopter. Vicky and the sheriff give him a salute. Now, you mentioned Last House on the Left, and that's a plot synopsis. But you did mention Last House on the Left. Is this one of the first like major rape revenge movies? Because this movie came out years before Last House on the Left. It came out way before I Spit on Your Grave. Like, it's almost kind of a pioneering movie in that way, a little bit, isn't it?
Thinking you brought that up last night. I was thinking about it, and I meant to look today. I'll have to look, to add an addendum to this, in text or something. I think it might be. My assumption was that there's probably older films, like pre-code films, that have rape revenge text or subtext.
The only one I can think of earlier than this, which was the direct inspiration for Last House on the Left, is the Ingmar Bergman movie, A Virgin Spring. Have you ever seen that?
Yes. I
Of
think this is definitely, I mean, this is a precursor to Dirty Harry and Death Wish.
yes,
Uh, Ideologically, it's a very different movie, but it was a clear influence on those characters.
yeah, like Death Wish and Dirty Harry are like classic reactionary cinema, and this movie is objectively not reactionary. It's a very
Now,
liberal cinema. Like it is.
and the thing is that, and I mean, this is more, this is not as much, probably economic left as I would like it to be. But the thing is, if this came out now, people would call it leftist because the Democrat Party's moved so far center that watching this now, this seems not so much this one, but when you get into the later films of the series, it seems pretty radical. Although it wasn't, in some ways, it was less radical then because the party was a little bit more open to moving leftward.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, yeah, especially in the modern context of a movie like this came out, people would like Chapo would review this movie for sure if it came out now. Like
Actually, I'm kind of surprised there hasn't been a Billy Jack reboot, and I think it's just because it's such a weird series.
it is, and I feel like a lot of people, and once again, even though this is easily like one of the least offensive portrayals of Redface in a movie, they would 100% have to get a Native American actor because there's no
Yeah,
fucking way any studio. Yeah,
that's a good Native American actor, so get one.
no, exactly. I fucking think so, 100%. I mean, they did that with the newest Predator movie, Prey, and people fucking loved it. You know,
But I am remembering now. So Laughlin, I'm pretty sure, does retain the rights to the Billy Jack character, or did up to his death.
so like you think his estate maybe holds it?
I think so because he was very protective of the Billy Jack character, the likeness, and the franchise his whole life.
That
So
makes a
it's
lot
very
of sense.
his estate still holds it. There's a lot of it. Okay, so part of the reason that we're going to make this a gradual series and we're going to revisit the series is because there's so much interesting shit about Laughlin. And the more I read about it, the more I found. And I thought that I was going to have a really concise little, some main points I wanted to hit on him for this episode. And as I started reading, I found so much fascinating shit about the guy from his early life up until like the last few years of his life. And I just don't know where to fit it all. This is just a strange character in independent cinema.
Very much so. But yes, that is the plot synopsis for Born Losers. Now, I will say I did like this movie, but I do have a couple problems with it. Of course, one is the portrayal of rape victims is very, very, very terrible.
It's bad.
Although obviously I understand this movie's 55 years old. There's only so much realism you can do from a movie that was written. Well, it was written by a 22-year-old woman,
And
but was directed by an old
it's dumb.
school silent generation guy.
Yeah.
But
And like
also another thing I have an issue with this movie is honestly it needed to be edited down so goddamn bad. There's no reason there's no reason this movie needs to be almost 2 hours long. I'm just gonna be honest.
there isn't. And it's like that because it's because Laughlin likes his dialogue. This is almost like okay, if you were gonna reboot this movie, you either trim it down to like an 80-minute action feel pop boiler, or you have like a Quentin Tarantino like disciple writing, and you really make all the dialogue pop. Because yeah, there's this. I'm gonna tell you something, Taylor.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is the shortest movie in the series. Yeah,
Oh, that fucking rocks. I mean, that's the thing though, right? Is that like I don't necessarily mind movies that are long, and I honestly don't. I don't think that the performances in this movie are bad or anything. It's just once again, it's just too fucking long, and things needed to be edited down quite a bit.
there's no reason for it to be as long as it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, once again, I was really hoping I could see some hapkido going on or whatever martial art he's doing more.
There is more in the sequels. I don't. There is a lot more actual action, and there's actually the action choreography in all of these films is by. I was actually reading about a pretty important Aikido artist who was one of the first people to really bring it to Hollywood, and is pretty advanced for the time, especially in Billy Jack. But even those movies, they aren't like it's not like Bloodsport. There's still a lot of dialogue in the sequels. There's a lot of character interactions, like because that's what Laughlin's really into. The reason that Billy Jack knows martial arts and uses guns is because that's what makes people come to see the movies. I think.
Yes, very much so. Um,
But there is some cool action stuff and some cool stunt work in Billy Jack, especially. But there's no reason for there to be almost none, and a lot of it is off screen or it's Laughlin standing at the edge of the frame just punching into outside of the screen, and we just hear psh, psh. Like that's a lot of what the action in this film is like.
oh yeah, and also even though with what little action there is, the reactions to the violence in this movie are pretty funny. Like the punches just absolutely do not connect. It's really funny.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, I do like this movie, and I'm interested to see where the series goes from here, especially now that I know that there's more action in the rest of the movies. I'd like to see where that goes.
there's
Um,
okay. There's more action. There is more politics in them also.
I don't mind that shit at all. Like seriously,
Yeah,
I do not mind if it's a
I know
movie that's like 90% politics but 10% kick ass action. I will 100% see it.
like in this movie, I feel like the politics are almost implied because he's fighting rapist bikers. You know, that's pretty apolitical. Those are just bad guys.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
in in the later films, the villains are senators or racist school boards. And of course,
Which is interesting, the racist school board thing, because Tom Laughlin in real life started a like Montessori school.
a very acclaimed one too. Like not like a like pyramid scheme one, but that was like his passion in life. Like it is true. I mean, by all accounts, it is true that Laughlin basically viewed himself as an activist and educator whose medium was film, rather
Yeah,
than a
just
who
very
wanted.
interesting.
Maybe explains why his movies are not very professional. You know,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think he's a very like well-meaning person, and I that's what I really appreciate about this movie and Tom Laughlin in general. Like he's a guy that, yeah, seems to me like somebody whose like entire adult life has been somebody who's trying to better the world. Um,
yeah, these are preachy movies. If you guys haven't picked up on that, like, if anyone listens, these are preachy films. Like they are.
yeah,
Um, I guess my take on that is you take everything in context with when it came out, and you look at how conservative and how, I guess, even right wing you would say general culture was in the late 60s and early 70s. And then you say, like, oh, maybe we wouldn't make a movie that was ham fisted now, but almost like maybe like this movie and even more so Billy Jack, were huge hits. Like this character hit with a lot of people. And this is a movie that the studios were like AIP, distributed it, but Laughlin and his character were kind of shunned by the studio system, even when it was, a proven hit. Um, this movie and Laughlin himself kind of were, you know, pushed out of the conversation in mainstream cinema, even at the height of his popularity.
yeah,
Um, there's a couple reasons I think for that, and you'll see it more. It almost becomes, subtext of the last couple of films in the series. So, but part of it is probably just these are relatively subversive films for the time, especially for American genre cinema that is appealing to a very broad audience that's seeing it in drive-ins.
mhm.
The other part is that Laughlin was very serious about independent films. At one point in 1980, when he was struggling to get the fifth Billy Jack film made, which is a struggle that continued for the rest of his life, he took out, I believe, a 5-page ad in the New York Times where he basically like was railing against the way that the major studio system treats independent filmmakers. He made a whole like piece in some major publications about it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of to me where the interest lies in this movie, because this is really one guy that just wanted to make a good, positive thing, and he really put all of his money and all of his adult life into it. And he really said, like, this is my legacy. Although, obviously, Laughlin, with his school, with a lot of his other work, you could argue that, obviously he had other things that were his legacy, but he seems to have really felt that it was Billy Jack and really fought to keep that character true to what it was and really suffered for his art.
No, for sure, absolutely. Um,
So I got a little hammy there.
no, it's all good. Before we get too much into our thoughts, I do want to get into a couple reviews first that I found on Amazon.
Yes.
Now, this movie doesn't have a lot of reviews on Amazon, but I did find some good ones here and some actual good ones here, although some of them are a little funny. First review here is from Dana Phelps. She gives it 4 stars, and she says, "Edgy even today. Special note for Jane Russell appearance." First of all, if you are a classic cinema fan and appreciate Jane Russell, her appearance in this film makes the whole thing worth watching. She is magnificent in the movie. And honestly, I will say, we didn't mention it too much, but she does put in a pretty solid performance, I would say,
Yeah,
honestly.
she's Jane Russell. She's a consummate pro. By the way, Taylor, I
Mhm.
don't know if you've seen Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
No, I'm not.
Or, it's Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe. It
Mhm.
is a great comedy. Like, I highly recommend it if you want to see like a classic era comedy. And I don't normally like comedies from that era.
I've only
Uh,
seen some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe. I've never seen anything else with her in it.
Some like it hot's okay. I like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes a lot more. Also, in that movie, Jane Russell is just. This is a dumb thing to say. It's like saying Pam Anderson was hot, but like Jane Russell, pretty hot in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Oh, I've seen some pictures of her after I looked her up, and yeah,
Ooh,
definitely, ooh, like the eyes pop out like the wolf thing, like
falling down like in The Mask.
yeah, right. Even some of her earlier work with bigger stars didn't give her as much of a chance to act, but she practically steals the entire show with just a few minutes on screen. The use of rape as a main theme throughout the plot makes the daring as well as raw in its power for dramatic themes. A gang of rapist bikers abduct and torment local citizens, thus Billy Jack must make the choice of being silent or doing something about it. It plays the line with sexualization or sexploitation, if you like, but it does not cross a violent or graphic adult line that would otherwise push it over a boundary for most, probably. Now, I it it, it gets to they shy away from the aftermath so much to some extent that it becomes cartoonish, and
Yeah,
that's bad. That's the bad part we've mentioned many times,
that's
obviously.
but I do think that the treatment of the actor rape is serious. It doesn't feel like it's a thing that we, the audience, are supposed to take as a serious act of violence. But there are basically two reactions. There are three distinct reactions to the women in this movie forward. There, after there's a girl that's just hysterical nonsense. She's babbling like a child, and she just like screams into the air.
Mm-hmm.
It's very stupid. It's that's the most offensive portrayal, I would say. Um,
And there's also the
there,
girl who starts sucking on her thumb, the Jane Russell's daughter character after she gets
yes,
raped.
that character also, you know, before that, but it's actually she's already had an encounter with the bikers before that. So that's the second time she's assaulted in the film. Before that, she's kind of just acting mildly annoyed that
Mm-hmm.
she was raped, and she's kind of like, which I don't know. Maybe that's like of the three responses, that seems like maybe the most plausible. But also, it's like, well, yeah, but wouldn't she have on the other end of the spectrum a little more trauma than just being like, I can't believe this happened.
Yeah, I can't believe I just got sexually assaulted. Man, what a bummer. Like,
The
yeah.
the the third is our female protagonist in the movie, um, who is already like a snarky kind of tough rich girl who just becomes tougher and snarkier kind of, and maybe a little bit, you know, I don't know, a little jaded because of the being assaulted. It's it's not good. It's weird. I don't know. given the standards of the time, I don't think it's particular to Laughlin. I think that's pretty much how any filmmaker would have handled it. I was trying to handle it well,
Mm,
but it's not great.
no, I agree. Um, Next, she says, or next they say, in a way, it's rather brave of the filmmakers to bring rape criminality to such a forefront because it is underrepresented, but also the times were a lot different back then, which also makes sense, I think.
Yeah,
The technical prowess of the photography and the nuanced directing is ambitious for the budget and achieves a lasting impression from a remarkably well put together storyline. The attitudes are far different than ours today, but still,
remarkably well put together storyline.
yeah. But it still carries a lot of weight in the dialogue, and the tension runs high throughout. There's enough action to make it palatable to a younger audience. Some of the scenes involving rape or just the talking about it may make some viewers uncomfortable, even if there's no actual nudity or depictions of the act itself. There's not much for martial arts fans who may expect something from reading about Billy Jack movies. Probably
Yeah,
me. That was me. Um,
yeah,
this one has understated fight scenes that are nonetheless very dramatic and engaging. It's got a lot of interesting subtleties from a time when there was a large amount of exploration in creative cinema. The film has a lot of style and intelligence behind what could have become a very thin piece of work done in bad taste. Somehow they pulled off a classic. I agree with most of that review.
I must agree with that. I think this person is more generous than I would
Yes.
be. But that is how I, and the reason that I'm being less generous is because this is on a podcast that I want to be informative. My personal opinions on this movie and the series are that I love it, with
Mm.
flaws and all. This makes me, it, this sounds so fucking lame. It makes me feel good to see this character and to know about Laughlin and who he was. It makes me feel like it's like a good thing in my life. That is, but these
No, I
are
agree.
not like films. So I'm trying, but like, I think this person feels similar to how I do about Laughlin, where they're
Yeah.
just like, what a cool, good guy.
All right. Next review here is from Ralph. Just a singular Ralph. Like Prince, but just Ralph, I guess. They give it 4 stars as well, and the header of the review says violent flick. First of all, if you're a classic cinema fan and appreciate Jane Russell, her performance in this film makes the whole thing worth watching. She is magnificent in the movie. Even some of her earlier work with bigger stars. Oh, never mind. I think.
Just read this review.
Wait, did I just do it?
Yeah, yeah, you just read this one. I swear to God.
Feels. Oh, interesting. I guess maybe I did. Interesting.
I'm positive.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. There was actually a better reviewer, so I'm gonna go for the 3 star review here first.
Okay.
The reviewers from Siler Family gives it 3 stars, and the header of their review says not enough Billy Jack Shin, which I thought was very funny play
Yeah,
on words there. Um, and they said, I saw the movie Billy Jack when it originally released and especially enjoyed the fight scenes. The movie itself was solid as well, with a charming independent feel and overall positive message. Now, many decades later, I finally got around to seeking out its predecessor, The Born Losers. It was described as a gritty biker gang terrorizes community, typical drive-in movie fare of the time. There wasn't much mention of martial arts scenes, but surely they would be there. Tom Laughlin was more than capable of delivering them, but he didn't. This movie is everything one would hope for in a low budget but well made, good guy prevails in the end film. Only one thing would have made it more complete, and that would have been more, or really any good fight scenes. Still, it's
yeah.
watch for the late 60s flashback. And I also agree with that review to a certain extent.
Well, like, and that's again, like, I agree with that very much. This film was literally, this is Laughlin was trying to get Billy Jack in various films made for 10 years, 12 years by the time. And so when the biker craze started, he really did pump this script out to get it made. So, and which I think when you know that, it makes a lot of sense. Um, the Billy Jack film, the film after this one, it feels much more complete and cohesive. And for me, that explains a lot about why there isn't a lot of action in this movie, and also why it's so kind of muddled. He just was like, I need to get this character, and I need to prove that this Billy Jack character works.
Yeah. Oh, and
But
also,
yeah, no, not enough action. And I love these movies, but it's not, you know, I want to see him break some arms.
Exactly. Okay, so I found the review that I accidentally copy pasted the other one, but let's get from Ralph. Violent flick, 4 stars. They said this movie I rate good. Has a soft music menu. Also has some scratches in the film that I noticed. Running time is 113 minutes. Good stereo separation on the commentary, but also very loud. The commentary with Tom and Dolores were out of sync with what they were discussing. In the movie, those 4 chicks were just asking for trouble, and they found it with the bikers. Guess they were curious. So this guy's just victim blaming at this point. That's literally all that's going on here.
4 bad girls get punished.
Yeah, just Jesus Christ. What a dumb idiot. The guy in the Volkswagen mouthing off to a bunch of bikers that were and did kick his ass. They wouldn't let up once they got him. Make him pay. He made the mistake of not keeping his eyes to himself when pulling up next to them.
This guy just watched this movie and he's like, just at face value, it's like, I'm identifying with the bikers.
Yeah, that's a little yikes going on there. The one chick on the back of the child's bike, who was a really cool dude, ruthless looking, enticed him by using a mouth gesture, but he wasn't staring before that. Bad move on his part. And after he accidentally hit the press button, his mouth got him in trouble. The prez was going to let it go. I think this guy also might be illiterate. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's Charlie who from fucking Always Sunny who wrote this review.
Yeah. We need to find Ralph and go Billy Jack on it.
Yeah, seriously, right?
Wow.
I think the part that got me was hearing his 2 front teeth break. That gangrene was a woman hitter with his fist, yet and speechless was something else too, along with crabs. 2 male bikers kissing was a turnoff for me. Yuck, but to each his own. That's the part he has a fucking issue with.
That is something that we forgot to talk about. This is another flaw in this movie, for as far as like another subject matter flaw that has aged poorly. The biker gang is all bisexual. Like that's part of their evil characterization. I completely that is a thing. That I'm sorry that it's there. I believe that as Rothman got older, he probably, like a lot of people like him, excuse me, of his age, probably would regretted that later on. But yeah, the biker gang is queer, and that is part of their bad guy characterization in the film. I don't know how else to say it. It sucks.
I mean, it was the 60s. That was when being gay was still considered a mental illness. The times were different. You know what I mean?
I mean, I have to believe, knowing everything, that probably later on, probably maybe even 10 years or so later, that Rothman probably didn't feel that way, given everything else we know about him.
Yeah, I mean, this was also pre-Stonewall riots, so like, queer activism wasn't quite there yet. So like, I give him a pass for the most part on that one.
But in me too. But I do feel like once that review, and this guy, I guess, hated. This was his big issue with the movie, yeah, and also I guess that the Lakers didn't live.
Yeah, exactly. I liked Jack Starrett. That was a good role for him. When you run up against that many bikers, it's best to keep your eyes forward and your mouth shut and pray and hope they don't start something with you or anyone else for that matter. I would recommend this movie in spite of everything. I enjoyed
it. In spite of bikers for Baron?
Yeah. But yeah, so the last sentence says, I would recommend this movie in spite of everything. I enjoyed it. From a man who I can only describe as probably functionally illiterate, and that is Ralph, with his review of The Born Losers.
Scary man.
Yeah, this man I think should be on a list somewhere. Not sure which list, but he should be on a list somewhere.
If you're listening and you wrote this review, please get in touch with me. I would love to pick your brain. Not so much for the podcast. I just need to understand.
Exactly. But yes, that's all the reviews here. So any final thoughts before we conclude here, Brian?
I think if you're interested in sort of like independent film, kind of 70s driving, grindhouse films, 60s, and especially like movies that were culturally or sort of like socio-politically influential, these are important movies. They're weird. They're kind of a mess. They are amateurish in a lot of ways. Again, Laughlin is a guy who was obsessed with making movies to further his message. And so the message is above the medium for him in a lot of ways. But these are fascinating movies. And again, they were hits. They were, he became an icon for a while. Um, and I just don't see a movie, a series, a character like that getting a chance to be a hit in the film ecosystem now. But boy, it really hit for a lot of people at the time.
It did. And yeah, my final thoughts are I think this is a good film. Definitely needed more action. But I will say I'm very, very excited to see the sequels, especially you said The Trial is the best, or
That's The Trial is the best written, just the best going on. Politics wise, it's also the longest.
oh god, I'm so fucking
I mean,
excited.
so most of them are around 115 minutes. The Trial of Billy Jack is 170 minutes.
Oh fuck, that's gonna be so much fun.
But we have one before that, so don't worry. You'll have time to prepare yourself.
Exactly. All right. But yep, we're definitely running out of time here because I have to go to sleep because I'm an old ass millennial. So this will be Taylor signing off here.
And I have to go for my nighttime walk around the park because I'm an old man. This is Bribey James.
Hell yeah. And if you listen to our podcast, you are definitely not a born loser. You are a born winner.
Aw.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.